Hi everyone. So this month, our radical self-care practice of unstuffing our emotions will welcome jealousy and envy. We're going to go over the benefits that these two social emotions can bring into our lives if we allow ourselves to embrace them. But first, I want to do a quick recap on what we've already learned so far from this series. First off, we know that emotions are messengers. We must feel them, label them, and take appropriate action to process them. If we do not take the appropriate action to process them, we end up carrying. Emotions don't just go away. They still hang around if they're not processed. So we end up carrying around all this emotional baggage. Then we start feeling heavy and burdened down, and a lot of our space ends up being taken up by these unprocessed emotions. So we start to lose our ability to process new information. So think about your computer and all the information that brings in. And if we never delete anything, if we never, empty it out, then the computer can start to run a lot slower. It becomes a lot more difficult. It doesn't turn on right. We have a lot of problems. That's basically what's happening when we're hanging on to all of our emotions. There's just no more room anymore. And so our whole system starts to slow down. Now, the other thing that we've learned is that the emotions are ours. Nobody makes us feel a certain way. Those emotions, if we really think of them as messengers, they're trying to tell us something. And if we get the message and we process it and we do the appropriate action, they just dissipate. But nobody is making us feel sad, glad, mad. That's not, and to use blame because they've made us feel these uncomfortable emotions is not the mature way to deal with our emotional states. And I think because we are not an emotionally adept society, we haven't learned. As children, we're very empathic, so we can feel our emotions, we can feel other people's emotions. And it can get real fuzzy and very confusing about who's and what's. And because we really are not an emotionally intelligent society. No one taught me, well, this is what you're feeling, this is what I'm feeling, there's a boundary there. No one taught me that. So it's very easy for me to still be like, oh, I can feel their anger. What am I going to do about that? And start to take responsibility for those things. But we can't take responsibility for other people's emotions. Those emotions that we each have, that someone else has, those are messengers for them, not for us. The other thing that we've learned about is that emotions are valid and true, but they're not always correct. So in a nutshell, whatever I'm feeling is true for me. I am actually feeling anger. I am actually feeling jealousy. I'm feeling rage. I'm feeling happy. But I may not, again, have all of the information in the correct context. So whether or not they are the most appropriate emotion for the context, that may not always be correct. So, for example, I could have my best friend, I know that she went to the party down the street and I'm really pissed off about it and upset, and I'm feeling jealous because she's having a really great time down at that party and she didn't invite me. When maybe the fact is that I didn't check my emails and she did text me or she did email me and I just didn't get the message. So again, my emotions were true, but because I didn't really have the full picture, they weren't necessarily correct about the situation. And the last thing that last month we went over anger. Anger, in a nutshell, is really about warning you when someone or some situation is possibly treading on your boundaries and that you need to stand up for yourself. The job, though, is to honorably protect and restore your boundaries without harming another's boundaries. And you can see examples everywhere of where this is not happening. When we see road ragers, or we're seeing people being uncivil at the Target checkout line, that's not honorably protecting your boundaries. That's not honorably using your anger. When you start invading someone else's boundaries, when you're starting to have a rant, that is a dishonorable way to use anger, and that's not the use of that. So really understanding that our job, the action, is for us to protect our own boundaries, restore our own boundaries, but never to harm someone else's boundaries. So, welcome. Welcome to this month's emotions, jealousy and envy. These two emotions are social emotions that are absolutely vital for our survival. And because they're so vital for our survival, they spark a very extreme response. Remembering our mates and our social resources are tied to our survival and to our tribe. So when they become threatened, a social response is necessary. All right, and that's why jealousy and envy are in play. And that's why they are such intense emotions. They're also, because they're so intense, and because so many of us have not channeled them properly and do the appropriate action necessary when we get the message, we have actually shunned jealousy and envy in our society. We've made them emotions that are not acceptable. And so a lot of us have actually shunned or put these emotions into our shadow categories. And what we are hoping is that by radically unstuffing our emotions, we're going to hopefully be promoting the ability for all of us to care for and protect ourselves emotionally so that we have the survival skills, really good survival skills, social survival skills, and that we allow our emotional messengers to guide us in our relationships and to be choosing really appropriate actions for ourselves and decisions for ourselves. So let's talk a little bit about jealousy. Jealousy is our relational radar. It is, it's that radar that sounds off in our most intimate one-on-one relationships. The definition of jealousy is feeling or showing suspicion of someone's unfaithfulness in a relationship. It's the intolerance of rivalry or unfaithfulness. The gifts that it brings are commitment, security, connection, loyalty, and fairness. The action required when jealousy arises in response to challenges that may destabilize your connection to love, mate retention, or loyalty. These challenges may come from external sources, such as that cute secretary that your husband just hired, or from an internal lack of self-worth, or both. The internal questions we want to ask ourselves when jealousy shows its head and starts rearing up is what has been betrayed and what must be healed and restored. Fact is, we are social beings, and a healthy, committed relationships are vital to our well-being and survival. And dependable mates, their functions really are to nurture and protect our children and family, provide intimacy, love, security, companionship, sexual communication, friendship, and when our mate is unreliable or our position as their primary focus is threatened, then jealousy is going to arise. And it's going to be warning you of this very real threat to your security and well-being. So it's a natural and healthy emotion, and we want it to be there. We want the radar signal to go off if there's something wrong. The only problem is if we really aren't listening, if we've got it in the shadows and we aren't listening. Now, jealousy and envy, as I mentioned in other classes, there's always other emotions that are attached. All the emotions travel in packs. They rarely travel alone. And usually these two travel with our intuitive fear and our angry protection. And think about that. If you become jealous, if our safety and security is being threatened, then certainly anger is going to come up, because there's going to have to be some boundary restoration. And jealousy also is going to have intuitive fear. There's going to be a fear if our security is threatened in any way. So our intuition is flying up. And if we aren't paying attention, then we're going to start not being able to utilize our intuition the way we need to. And I'll talk more about that later. So those are the other emotions that will probably come up once jealousy, and they make sense. Now, envy. Envy is our, it's not so much about direct one-on-one relationships, it's about our social relationships and where we stand in our social settings. So it's a feeling of discontent or resentful longing aroused by someone else's possessions, qualities, or luck. It is a desire to have a quality, a possession, or others' desirable attributes that belong to someone else. So we want either their money or like the kids, they're fighting over a teddy bear, or we want to look like them or be like them in we want some of their attributes. Envy is our interactional radar. It's our social and cultural status. It gives us a warning sign when there's something out of sync in our social or work settings. The gifts that it brings are fairness, security, access to resources, proper recognition, and self-preservation. Action required. Envy arises in response to challenges that may destabilize your connection to material security, resources, or recognition. These challenges may come from, again, external sources, or from an internal lack of self-regard, or both. So if you're not getting the same pay as someone else in your department, your envy can start to come into play. That would be an external source. The internal questions that we have to ask ourselves is, again, what has been betrayed, what must be healed and restored. The same boundary restoring anger and intuitive fear are going to show up in envy that show up in jealousy, because it's a similar situation. One is more one-on-one relationship, one is all about our social relationships. Envy helps us to identify risks to our social position and our security in a social group. Envy alerts us if there's betrayal or challenges to our well-being within that social group. But it does so in connection with a fair and secure distribution of resources and recognition. So basically, if one of the kids in the family is the favorite, and there's rivalry going on because there's not the fair distribution of attention maybe being given by the parental authority figures. Same thing's going to happen in the workplace. If I think that my boss is treating me more unfairly and they've got a couple of pet employees that they're being really nice to, and I feel there's an unfair distribution of resources going on or recognition going on, that's when my envy is going to kick in. Envy responds to threats to our social positions and our connection to resources. So food, money, privilege, protection, belonging, and social standing. If I'm not making enough to pay my rent, but everybody else in my department is making 3 times as much, then my envy comes in so that I can start to advocate for myself and ask for more money. Envy stands up for you in instances of unfairness or favoritism, or when resources have been taken away in preference for another. Now think about how relevant this is. And think about also that we push this oftentimes into the shadow. We don't want to feel it too much. But how relevant right now. I mean, so much of what's going on in the country on a social level is all about fair and equitable resources. That's a lot of the talk that you're hearing. Social reformists right now, social activists, it's all about, wait a minute, you know, there's not a fair distribution of wealth. There's not a fair distribution of how we're treating people in the workplace. So all of these questions are coming up right now. So it's really relevant that this emotion is obviously one that's being triggered everywhere. When resources are unfair or there's favoritism in place, we need our envy to come up and advocate for us. Think about, again, the wage gaps, the women in the workplace not getting paid equitably, blatant discrimination practices. These are all being called out right now because there's envy. Envy enables you to understand social structures, to work within those structures, or to leave those structures behind if you cannot work within them. It helps you to gather and nurture resources and recognition, again, without devaluing others. Healthy envy does not allow you to devalue others in order to value yourselves more. All right. When you are allowing your healthy envy to flow, it will usually bring us a very good sense of internal security and intuition that we need to respond to the many threats and changes that are happening to our resources in our modern jungle. Levels of jealousy and envy. All of the emotions have, McLaren has defined all of the emotions as having 3 basic states. The flowing state is the state that we don't really notice. It's just like we have a patrol system. It's like the radar, but there's nothing blipping in it. And when jealousy and envy are in their flowing state, we aren't going to notice it. There's nothing in our system. There's nothing alarming any of our signals to go off. And basically, when you surround yourself with trustworthy people, you may never feel jealousy or envy. When it's in a mood state, that's when we're going to start feeling envy and jealousy come up. And it usually comes up as a warning that someone may not be as trustworthy or there's an injustice at hand. And if we can acknowledge it and welcome it, rather than pretend that we don't require security in our important relationships, then we're going to be able to respond to it in a healthy manner. In the intense state, it it may become toxic because it becomes, again, this is a survival, it's triggering survival behaviors, survival action. And it can become toxic if it's not channeled properly. This is where it gets a really bad rap, and again, we want to just push it into the shadows. If you start to move into rage and revenge, then it's a signal that you're not using your anger properly. All right? Let's see if there's anything else. In the intense, an example of the intense state is gossip in the workplace. When you've got a really toxic, gossipy workplace, that's where jealousy and envy is not being channeled properly. And gossip really, in a sense, is a war strategy. Gossip is when you're telling stories to try and get somebody to be on your side. And we're going to talk more about the toxic form of gossip in more detail. But it's an example of how jealousy and envy can be utilized and channeled improperly. So envy and jealousy can be found early in childhood, but it, again, is not culturally sanctioned emotion. So oftentimes it gets sent into the shadow. And just look at the kid. He's like, wait a minute, I've got the popsicle. I really would have liked that ice cream cone. And a lot of us were kind of conditioned that we have to share everything. We can't have things that are our own. And that we shouldn't be jealous. We shouldn't be envious of other people's stuff. We should share our stuff with them. So we weren't allowed to really express our desires. And when you're not allowed to express your desires, then they get pushed into the shadow. When these shadowy elements are projected onto others, we've already mentioned this in other classes. If we can't own them ourselves, we end up projecting them onto others. So we'll see other people as jealous and envious, but we won't really be able to ever see that behavior in ourselves. Let's see. In our modern world right now, we require more money, more resources, more things, more infrastructures just to feed ourselves than our ancestors ever did. They could walk outside and pick berries. We probably could do that, but that's not how. We have a ton of infrastructure. We have a ton of resources. And so it's necessary for us. That envy has to come up so that we can navigate getting these resources for ourselves. They help us to connect to and monitor our source of interpersonal, material, and communal support. If we keep, and we're going to talk more about the shadow aspect, but if we have shadows, if we don't own our envy, if we don't own our jealousy, then we can either overexpress or underexpress our envy. And if we're overexpressing, then we might be grabbing at everything. And everybody else, to hell with everybody else, I've got to have what's right for me. If this little kid is overexpressing his envy, he isn't going to ask politely if he can have some of her ice cream. He's just going to grab it all for himself. Or he's going to learn how to underexpress and just pretend he doesn't have any needs at all, and he doesn't have any desires, and he's not going to ask. He's not going to receive. Even if she offers him the ice cream, he'll say, no, I don't need it. So you start to have both the overexpression and the underexpression. Envy has a crucial protective function in that it exists to keep us safely connected to the social and material support we need to live in and flourish. Now let's talk a little bit more about gossip, because gossip is an easy, it's one of the ways that envy and jealousy manifests in our modern world. And anthropologists really have defined gossip as an informal communication process that has basically existed in all countries, all nations, everywhere. And while a lot of places still, and even a lot of psychologies will say that gossip has to be ended, we need to get rid of it, it's an informal communication process. And McLaren would argue that it's a necessary informal communication process. So the definition of gossip is casual or unconstrained conversation or reports about other people, typically involving details that are not confirmed as being true. McLaren tells us that the good that can come out of gossip is that it can make us aware of various social situations that are going on. So if Mary Jo tells me that John's mother-in-law died over the weekend, that is giving me information that I can now use, because now I'm going to understand that maybe he's sad. I'm going to understand that his work didn't get in on time because he couldn't work on anything over the weekend. It's going to give me a piece of information that I may or may not have come by any other way. He may have not felt the need to tell me for whatever, but that's kind of the upside of what gossip. This informal communication gives us a lot of cues in which we get to navigate our social environment, especially in our, well, not especially, it can be work or at home, but we most often think about it in our workplaces. But gossip can get very messy if we engage in it as a tool of social control, all right? When we use gossip to align ourselves with a group against another, that's an unethical use of gossip, all right? And think about in high school, the nasty girls. Well, maybe it was middle school even. They used gossip. I vividly remember that there would be girls coming saying, be on our side, be on our side. And I'd be like, I don't even know what are you arguing with those people about? So it's the inappropriate use of gossip and the way, and it's a form in which jealousy and envy are being inappropriately channeled, is through gossip. And it's to form alliances to be against someone, to be at war with someone, to take sides with someone. Think about the reality TV shows. Almost all of them, they form some sort of alliances via gossip in order to get others kicked off the show or fired. So toxic gossip is used as a method of social control, where someone tries to destroy another's reputation. Bullies often use gossip to break down their targets. And no matter what your political affiliation, all you have to do is look at the current president's tweets. Many of them are using gossip to break down perceived enemies. Propaganda is a form of gossip that governments use to control their people or to break down regimes in other countries. Think about what's been in the news. Russia's use of Facebook and social media was used to manipulate the election. It's a form of gossip. And of course, and we all have talked about social media being a form of gossip, and is it fake news? That is how they are using things to manipulate against others. All right, so this is all extremely relevant within our current society right now with all the things that are going on socially and politically. Let's see. Now I want to talk a little bit about ethical gossip. Ethical gossip is the use of gossip not as a gathering of allies to defeat the other, but as a practice of verifying and validating data and brainstorming various strategies on strengthening relationships. It can be an informal communication used to convey and understand unwritten social and emotional rules of social situations in which we encounter. And that happens all the time. You know, when somebody, again, is telling me about a death in someone's family, or that there was, maybe someone was in a car accident, it helps me to navigate social and emotional rules so that I'm nice to that person, so that I can be more empathetic, so that I can be more understanding about what's going on. Ethical gossip can be a way to attain closeness and understanding in relationships. It can relieve inner tension as it allows us to share emotive and empathic impressions we've not been allowed to mention in public. In the middle of a huge leadership meeting, I can't necessarily raise my hand and say, you know, I'm kind of feeling so-and-so. That's not an appropriate venue. But there may be, you know, when I'm having coffee in the conference room, I can say to someone, you know, I'm feeling a lot of tension with so-and-so, or I'm feeling a lot of anger with them. Is it me? Did you feel that also? And that can help validate some of the impressions that we're getting. And the purpose is not to destroy anyone's reputation, it's just to validate our own emotional senses. And we are a society that sometimes I may label emotion, I may empathetically think I feel something, but it's nice to be validated because we don't get a lot of validation when it comes to emotion in our society. Also, for emotional sensitives, again, that validation piece. If you're picking up, you're really empathic and you're picking something up, it's nice to have that validated by someone else. Okay. So again, gossip can help us, and it's been used forever. And again, instead of pushing something into the shadow, which is what we've done with gossip, nobody wants to gossip, but we all can't wait to listen to hear what somebody has to say. It is a method of informal communication. And if we use it empathically, if we use it with the intention that we want to strengthen relationships rather than create war between them, then it's a whole new way to view gossip. And also to take envy and jealousy out of the shadows also. Gossip can help us connect with others, understand human behavior, identify and change our social positions, and either support or undermine rules or set new rules. Gossip is a powerful, powerful thing. And so being conscious of how you use gossip, being able to use it ethically and empathically is an important practice that, again, may help us to bring envy and jealousy out of the shadows also. So talking about practices, radical self-care practices that can help us process jealousy and envy. So we're going to talk about an ethical gossiping practice. We're going to talk about gratitude and gentle heart. These are 3 self-care practices that you can use in order to help you process jealousy and envy. And if you're doing them on a regular basis, you may start to find that your relationships start to strengthen. You start to bring people that are trustworthy into your life. You start to stay away from those relationships, because really what jealousy is telling you is maybe this relationship isn't working. Even in the workplace, if you've got, if there are too many situations in which you're not being treated fairly, is this the right place for you to be? It's telling you to reevaluate the situation. So let's look at a gratitude practice. The purpose of a gratitude practice is to connect with awe and reverence of gratitude. Many times with jealousy and envy, there may be a sense of scarcity, that I don't have enough. So again, kind of flipping it on the other side and building up your sense of gratitude for everything that you do have. So you want to use this when you're feeling angry, jealous, lonely, unappreciated, or there's just a sense of scarcity going on. The procedure: use a notebook, journal, or you could use your cell phone notes app. I use this all the time. Write down one person or situation each day that you are grateful for. And then write down 5 reasons you are grateful for this person or situation. And you want to do this at least once daily. And you can't do the same ones. You have to pick a different person or a different situation and find those 5 reasons. And really, spend a few minutes. Why? What you're really asking when you write that person down, then you're asking yourself, why am I grateful for them? And what they found in research studies is that this practice really does open people up. They start to feel more appreciation, less negative types of feelings, and more positive types of feelings have been found with this practice of gratitude. And then you want to be rereading these messages on a regular basis to remind yourself what it is that you're grateful for. This gentle heart practice. This is one of my favorite all-time practices. And the purpose of this practice is to instill calm, peace, and gratitude. And you want to use it when you're feeling frazzled, irritable, angry, or unforgiving. So you want to place your hands over your heart. And you can do this now. Place your hands over your heart and take gentle breaths in or out. Take a couple of deep, slow, gentle breaths in and then out. In and out. And then I want you to visualize a time, a scene, a situation, or a person in which you felt deep care and love. So maybe it was when you held your newborn baby, or maybe you got a brand new puppy, or maybe it was your significant other came home and you'd had a really bad day and they just held you. There's always looking out over the Grand Canyon or some natural setting. Visualize, be in this moment, and I want you to just breathe it in. Breathe in all the care, the love, the awe that you felt in that moment. And really be in that moment. Feel it again. And inhale it. Just let it go throughout your whole body. And exhale. Inhale it. And let it fill you. Completely fill you. Inhale that moment, that care, that love. Inhale it. Feel it. Feel it. Feel your whole body expanding because of the joy, the moment, the love. It's filling you completely. And then exhale it. And now as you inhale, bring it in. Fill yourself completely. And now give that moment back to the world in your exhale. Knowing that that care, that moment, you're sending it back out into the world. Inhale it. Fill yourself. And then exhale it. Giving it back out into the world. Inhale it. Fill yourself. And then exhale it. Giving it back out into the world. You can do this for as long as is comfortable for you. You can do this in the car before you have to go into some chaotic place to get you calm, peaceful, full of gratitude. It's also great because not only do you bring it in and fill yourself, but you're sending it back out into the world. So it helps to really overcome powerlessness also. Because maybe I can't go and save some major situation that's going on in the world, but I can send that moment back out into the world. That love, that caring moment, send it back out. It's a lovely practice, and I hope you try it often and regularly. Now we're going to try our last practice, which is our conscious gossip practice. This is something Carla McLaren came up with. And again, we've already talked about how gossip is a necessary informal conversation, and to try to take it out of the shadow and use it as a tool to strengthen relationships rather than undermining them. So the purpose is to clarify relationship issues, explore different perspectives, brainstorm strategies for improving the relationship. We want to use this when feeling relationships are stagnated, whenever triggers are occurring during communications, and if we're unsure of the best communication tactics that we could use when dealing with people in relationships. So our procedure is to identify a person that you gossip about consistently and with whom your relationship has stalled. So someone that you're having a difficult time with. It can be a friend, a loved one, somebody in your workplace. Then you need to ask a trusted friend for help in dealing with your gossip target. The purpose for this friend is not to be your ally in a war. Okay? They are there to try to be as objective as possible in giving you feedback and to brainstorm strategies, practices, and actions that might help strengthen the relationship. So you're using them to get opinions, ideas, techniques, and skills that can help you re-enter this relationship in a different way. All right? And again, the intention is very different. In a toxic gossip environment, you are using gossip to form allies and to create us versus them. In this, you're asking a friend to help you repair a relationship, to help you strengthen a relationship. Now, you open the gossip session by acknowledging your trouble in the relationship. So basically, you're telling your side of the story. This is what's happening, and it's what trouble is happening. And from then, just go ahead and talk about it. You tell your story. When you're done, you then allow the listener to ask questions and offer feedback. Now, when your friend gives you feedback, it's important that you're paying attention. Remember, their role is not to sympathize and to be on your side. Their role is to help you strategize on how to enter into the relationship differently. And this is a practice. It may take practice. It may take a couple of times really checking yourself. Am I really in it for the right intention? Am I out to badmouth someone's reputation, or am I trying to change my behavior in a relationship? You then close the gossip session with thanks and gratitude, and then go back to the relationship with your new skills and insights. Or you may have to let the relationship go if it's too damaged to survive. Don't go back in the same old way, because that is what leads to the gossip in the first place. When your gossip is conscious and ethical, you will increase your social skills and your empathy, and you'll become more able to create honest, healthy relationships. Learning to gossip ethically will also remind you that you can ask for and receive help in dealing with difficult emotions and difficult people. So this is something that you need a trusted friend to be able to do with you. And you need to put the rules right out there. I've heard that there are a lot of places that bring this conscious gossip practice into their workplace to try and change over the old style of how we talk about one another. And I think this is something, again, it is going to take practice. It's going to take a new mindset. But try it out. Let us know how it's working for you. And if you have any questions, please text us at 732-864-5508 or email us, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Here are some of our resources. There may be some videos that you would like to watch on ethical gossip and jealousy. Thank you.